Ethan and I had been in a secret relationship for 6 years, and we had finally decided it was time to tell everyone. I was filled with a quiet excitement, arranging a small get together with our families to make the announcement. As I stepped out of my apartment to grab something from my car, I heard voices from Ethan's place next door. One of his friends laughed, and the sound carried clearly. Ethan, your first love is back in town. What are you going to do about the little replacement you've been keeping around? He didn't reply. The silence that followed was heavy and uncomfortable, until another friend spoke up, his voice laced with amusement. You have to give it to him. He plays his cards well. 6 years of having her follow him around like a puppy isn't a bad deal. Now Sophia Miller is back, putting on her innocent act and asking you to come to her birthday. If you bring your stand-in girlfriend, do you think Sophia will wish she'd held on to you? The next day, just as his friend predicted, Ethan took me to Sophia's birthday party. He held my hand and acted like the perfect, loving boyfriend. But when Sophia suddenly burst into tears and ran out of the room, he let go of my hand, pushed me aside in his haste, and chased after her without a single word to me. I was left standing there, my dress stained with spilled wine and a fresh bruise forming on my arm from where I stumbled. I went home alone that night. Something inside me had shifted. I walked up the stairs to the attic, a room he had always kept locked, telling me it was his private space. What I found inside made a cold feeling spread through my chest. The walls were completely covered with photographs of him and Sophia, pictures from their past, documenting their smiles and shared memories. My heart felt heavy and still. I took out my phone and dialed my brother, who was living overseas. Leo, I said, my voice barely a whisper. About that engagement you mentioned. I've thought about it. I agree. There was a short pause on the other end of the line, then his concerned voice came through. Clara, did something happen? That familiar, caring tone made my throat tighten, and my eyes began to sting. I almost started crying. What could possibly happen to me? I forced a laugh, trying to sound cheerful. It's just that the neighbor's dog has had 2 litters of puppies, and I'm still single. It's getting a little embarrassing. He chuckled, and his tone lightened. That's the spirit. Then he paused for a moment. Wait, wasn't your neighbor Ethan? He's been afraid of dogs since he was a kid. Why would he be raising one? My voice caught in my throat. I hadn't expected him to remember such a small detail. Thankfully, he didn't push the subject. He changed topics. So, when are you coming back? Don't you want to meet the guy first before you make up your mind? I replied quickly, there's no need. If you and Dad approve of him, I trust your judgment. You can go ahead with the wedding arrangements. I'll sort things out here and come home soon. All right, he said, though he still sounded hesitant. Then he added, do you want to invite Ethan to the wedding? I heard his new girlfriend, the one he was waiting for, is back in town. Maybe he'll be getting married soon, too. So everyone knew he was waiting for her, except for me. I lowered my head, blinking rapidly to keep my tears from falling. No, I said. We had an argument. He sounded surprised. What happened? Because of his dog, I said quickly. Just then, I heard footsteps approaching the attic door. I ended the call in a hurry. When I looked up, I saw Ethan standing there with an amused look in his eyes. What dog? He asked. Who were you talking to? My brother, I said calmly. We were talking about your dog. He frowned. I don't have a dog. A moment later, he understood what I meant. Instead of getting angry, he laughed and lunged toward me, pushing me down onto a nearby pile of old blankets. Oh, so I'm the dog, am I? Then what does that make you? He leaned in close, his breath warm against my face. What used to make my heart flutter now only made me feel deeply uncomfortable. As I struggled to push him away, the collar of his shirt shifted, revealing a fresh cluster of bite marks on his collarbone. My leg brushed against a wooden crate, and the scrape I'd gotten at the party throbbed with a sharp pain. The sudden intensity of it brought tears to my eyes, and they spilled down my cheeks. The moment Ethan saw me crying, his whole demeanor changed. Clara, what's wrong? Did I hurt you? He quickly helped me sit up and looked me over with a panicked expression. Then he saw it, the bloody scrape along my calf. His voice trembled when he spoke again. How did this happen? Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you call me? It was as if he had completely forgotten what happened at the party the night before, as if Sophia's birthday and his actions had been erased from his memory. I sat there in silence, not sure if I should say anything, not sure if I should tear down the convincing mask of tenderness he wore. Ethan gently kissed my forehead and said in a soothing voice, "There, no more tears. Let me put some medicine on that." He stood up and went to find the first aid kit, still talking as if nothing was wrong. "You really don't know how to take care of yourself, do you? What would you do without me?" I just stared at his back, motionless. Yes, what would I do without him? I had pursued him for 22 years, and for 6 of those years we had been a couple. But Ethan, what I wanted was never the illusion you created for me. I wanted the real you, not this carefully built fantasy. That night, I couldn't sleep. I woke up from a nightmare and slipped out of his arms, sitting barefoot on the window seat and looking up at the moon. I must have dozed off at some point because I woke with a start when Ethan gently lifted me into his arms. He smiled at me, a mix of exasperation and amusement. "Why are you sleeping here? And without any clothes on? What am I going to do with you?" But then his smile faded. "Why is your body so hot?" My head felt heavy and fuzzy like it was filled with cotton. I didn't answer. I felt the coolness of his hand on my forehead. He frowned and quickly wrapped me in a blanket. Without another word, he changed his clothes, then returned with mine and started to dress me. I tried to push his hand away weakly. "I can do it myself. Could you just get me a cold towel?" Even saying the words was a struggle, but Ethan easily brushed my hands aside. "How many times have I dressed you? And now you're getting shy just because you're sick." After he quickly got me dressed, he carried me down to the car. As we were waiting in line at the hospital registration desk, a familiar voice cut through the quiet. "Ethan?" It was Sophia, her eyes red as she walked in from outside. Their eyes met, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Ethan's expression changed and he immediately left the line, rushing over to her and placing his hands on her shoulders with concern. "What happened? Are you hurt?" She sniffled. "I was just trying to make some porridge and I burned myself. I'm so clumsy." She rolled up her sleeve to show a red swollen patch on her arm. Ethan's eyes immediately softened. He lifted her arm and blew gently on the burn, his touch full of care. "Don't do things like this anymore. Just tell me what you want to eat, and I'll make sure you get it." Sophia nodded, her tears turning into a smile. "No one is as kind to me as you are, Ethan." He reached out and ruffled her hair. "Silly girl. If I don't take care of you, who will?" She beamed at him. Then her eyes drifted over to the long bench where I sat, pale and forgotten. But Ethan didn't even glance in my direction. He got back in line for her. He spoke to her gently, asking if she was cold or if she needed anything. And then he left with her, never once looking back at me. That was the difference between a replacement and the one who truly held his heart. No matter how convincing his performance was, no matter how tenderly he touched me, the moment Sophie appeared, I simply ceased to exist. I gave a bitter smile and forced myself to stand up. My legs felt shaky, but I made my way to the desk and registered myself, then slowly walked to the correct department. The fever was high, and I needed an IV drip to bring it down. I waited alone for my medication, then dragged myself to the infusion room. I don't know when I fell asleep, but I was woken up by a small hand shaking my shoulder. A little boy was standing beside me. "Miss, where's your boyfriend? You fell asleep and your blood started backing up into the tube. My mom called the nurse for you. We're going home now, but you shouldn't be alone. It's dangerous." I looked at him and thanked him and his mother. Then I forced myself to sit up straight and stared at the IV bag above me. By the time the treatment was finished, it was late in the afternoon. Ethan still hadn't called, not even once. I stood up, trying to leave the hospital on my own, but a wave of dizziness hit me and I collapsed back onto the bench. I had no other choice but to call him. There was a long pause after I told him I was still at the hospital. "Sorry, Clara," he said, his voice hesitant. Sophia was in so much pain, and she couldn't stand the smell of disinfectant at the hospital, so I brought her home first. I was going to come right back for you. Before he could finish, I heard Sophia's playful voice in the background. Ethan, are you done yet? I'm starving. Although Ethan quickly covered the phone's microphone, I had heard enough. Clara, it's not what you think. Just go home first. I'll come back later and explain everything. I curled my lips into a faint smile. I had no desire to hear any more of his explanations. I knew they would just be another set of lies. It's all right, Ethan, I said calmly. I can manage on my own. In this world, no one is so essential that you can't live without them. I hung up the phone and arranged for a car to take me home. I went home without any drama or tears. That night, as I expected, Ethan never came back. Later that night, while I was finishing an urgent project for my boss, my phone screen lit up. It was a notification that Ethan had shared one of Sophia's social media posts. The picture showed two shadows leaning into each other with the caption, "Who says no one waits for you in the same place? The one who truly cares will be there no matter how far you stray. Just turn around. They never left." I had barely tapped the like button before the post was deleted. Moments later, another message appeared, this time from his secondary account. He had reposted the exact same thing, clearly trying to hide it from me, but he had forgotten that I followed his other account as well. I laughed quietly to myself and unfollowed both of his accounts. That night, without Ethan next to me, I slept more soundly than I had in weeks. I woke up feeling clear-headed and refreshed. The next morning, I went to the office and handed my resignation letter to my supervisor. She was sad to see me go, but when I explained that I was leaving to get married, she gave me a warm hug and her best wishes. Once my departure was official, my coworkers, who had been upset about me leaving, suddenly changed their tune when they heard I was getting married. They insisted on a farewell dinner, and I agreed, arranging a night of food and karaoke. Fate has a strange sense of humor. Halfway through the night, I went to the restroom and ran into Sophia. She seemed completely at ease, as if any awkwardness between us was entirely my problem. With a gentle smile, she said, "What a coincidence to see you here, Clara." I nodded politely, but I had no interest in making small talk. I turned to go back to my private room, but she stepped in front of me, blocking my way. "Clara, do you dislike me?" she asked, her tone still pleasant. "I just wonder why. We're actually quite similar, even down to how we eat beef. We both like it with vinegar." I froze for a moment at her words. For a long time, I had wondered why Ethan always dipped my beef in vinegar before giving it to me. He had told me it tasted better that way. I never liked it, but I didn't question it. Now I understood. It was never about me. He was just continuing a habit he had with her. A sick feeling settled in my stomach. But Sophia wasn't done. "And Clara," she continued, her voice almost sweet, "don't you think we look alike?" That one sentence shattered the composure I had been trying to maintain. I forced a smile. "Is that so? What an odd coincidence. I have to get back to my friends, excuse me." I brushed past her and walked away quickly. Back in the room, I felt chilled to the bone. I poured myself a glass of strong liquor to try and feel some warmth again. My colleagues were in high spirits and insisted that I sing a song. I was just looking through the playlist when the door to our room burst open. Ethan stood in the doorway, his eyes sweeping across the room before they landed on me, burning with a furious intensity. Before I could even speak, he crossed the room in a few long strides and grabbed me by the neck. "Who was that man you were with?" he yelled, his voice shaking with rage. I had never seen him like this, so violent and frightening. "What man?" I asked, my voice low and steady. "What are you talking about?" His eyes were bloodshot and his body was tense. My coworkers tried to pull him away, but they couldn't loosen his grip. "The man you dragged into the restroom to hurt Sophia," he shouted. "Tell me who he was." I could barely breathe. I raised my hand and slapped him hard across the face. The shock of it made him let go for a second, but the anger coming off of him only seemed to intensify. A few of my colleagues helped me onto the sofa, and I coughed, struggling to catch my breath. It took me a moment before I could speak clearly again. "Ethan, what are you talking about? Why would I take a man into a restroom, and Why would I ever hurt Sophia? His voice was cracked with disbelief and bitterness. If it wasn't you, then who was it? You're angry because I left you at the hospital to take care of her. You're upset that I haven't come home in days. So this is your revenge? You're cruel, Clara, truly cruel. A sharp pain twisted in my chest. I let out a bitter laugh and nodded slowly. If you're so sure it was me, why don't you call the police? Ethan pressed his lips together, his silence speaking volumes. The look of pure disappointment in his eyes felt like a physical blow. He finally spoke again. You're confident I would never report you. That's why you feel like you can do whatever you want, isn't it? I met his gaze, my own anger rising to meet his. He had just tried to choke me. What else was he capable of? Suddenly, he grabbed my wrist and pulled me out of the room. My coworkers tried to stop him, but I shook my head and gave them a faint smile. I'm sorry, I told them. This is a personal matter. Please don't let it ruin your night. I'll be back soon. Only then did they step aside. Ethan dragged me into another private room. Inside, Sophia sat on the sofa, trembling and wrapped in his jacket. A few of his friends were standing around her, comforting her. Ethan shoved me forward until I was standing right in front of her. Apologize to Sophia, he commanded, his voice sharp. You should be thankful she wasn't hurt any worse. If she had been, I would have made you pay for it. My knees hit the hard edge of the sofa, sending a jolt of pain up my leg. Sophia looked up with tear-filled eyes, shaking her head. Ethan, please, she said softly. This isn't Clara's fault. Maybe I just had bad luck tonight. She lowered her head and sobbed quietly. It made her seem so helpless and innocent. But what had I done wrong? A quiet laugh escaped my lips as I stood up straight again. I'm really curious, Ethan, I said. You're accusing me of a crime, but you have no proof. Just your words. And that's supposed to be enough for me to be found guilty? I'm not playing this game. If you come after me again, I will call the police. We had known each other for 22 years. I thought that by now, Ethan would know my character well enough not to doubt me. But in front of Sophia, those 22 years meant nothing. His bias was clear for everyone to see. And I was just the stand-in in their story. I didn't go back to the party. I went to the front desk, paid the bill, and later sent a message to my office group chat to apologize and say goodbye. Back at my apartment, I collapsed onto the sofa, completely drained. My mind drifted back to a night 6 years ago when Ethan had shown up at my door, drunk, asking for a place to stay. I helped him to the couch and sat across from him, just looking at him. I don't know how long I watched him before he opened his eyes. His gaze was intense. Do you like me? He asked. Before I could think, I nodded. He smirked, then reached out and pulled me toward him, kissing me forcefully. That was the night I became his girlfriend, in name at least. I had heard about Sophia before, but I'd never met her. By the time I was free from my university studies, their relationship was already over. I truly believed that I had helped him heal, that I was what he needed. Looking back on those 6 years now, I realized what a joke it had all been. The next morning, I hired a moving company to help me pack. Ethan didn't have many things at my place. Since he lived next door, he had only brought over some daily necessities. All of his belongings fit into a single small box. I went into his apartment, gathered every photo of us and every gift I had ever given him, and brought them back. I left his keys on his table. As for my own things, I had them all packed and shipped overseas. After the movers were done and the real estate agent had inspected the apartment, I remembered that Ethan still had a copy of my key. I called him several times, but he hung up each time. Finally, he sent me a text. Unless you are ready to apologize, I don't want to hear from you. I stared at the message for a long moment, then I called a locksmith and had the locks changed. The next morning, I handed the new keys to the agent and boarded a plane with my suitcase without a single look back. This place that I had once felt so attached to, for the first time, leaving it felt easy. Just before takeoff, my phone started buzzing with messages. It was my birthday, and friends were sending their well wishes. I replied to each one, then turned off my phone. As the plane climbed into the sky, I sat by the window and thought that with so many people wishing me well, my future had to be happy. When we landed, it was a beautiful night in London. The city lights sparkled below. Dragging my suitcase, I walked out of the terminal and saw them immediately. My parents and my brother, Leo, were waiting for me. Dad, Mom, Leo. My brother took my suitcase and I ran into my mother's arms. Feeling her hug me again felt like a dream. "You're finally home," she whispered, patting my back. "I missed you so much." Her soft voice made the guilt I felt even deeper. 9 years ago, I had chosen to stay in a different city for college, chasing after a boy, ignoring my family's pleas for me to stay closer. They let me go without a fight. That goodbye had stretched into nearly a decade. "Mom," I said quietly, "I'm not going anywhere again. From now on, I'm staying here with you and Dad." My parents looked at each other and smiled. "That's all we ever wanted," my mother said. With a light heart, I walked out of the airport with my family. Back in his apartment, Ethan was in a very different state. He sat on the floor, dialing my number over and over. Every year on my birthday, he had a special bracelet made for me at a boutique. He always got a reminder to pick it up. When he received the reminder that day, he suddenly remembered it was my birthday. He looked at his phone and realized with a jolt that I hadn't contacted him at all. A strange feeling of emptiness settled over him. He typed a message and sent it. "Since it's your birthday, I'll let it go. Just apologize to Sophia and we can move on." A red exclamation mark appeared next to the message. "You are not on the recipient's friend list." His hands trembled as he stared at the words. He called me, but my phone was off. He called more than 10 times, and with each unanswered call, a sense of panic grew inside him. Finally, he jumped in his car and sped home. When he got to my door, he found that his key no longer worked. He stood there, confused and frustrated, and started pounding on the door. A newlywed couple opened it, looking at him with confusion. Defeated, he went back to his own apartment, only to find that every trace of me was gone. The matching mugs, the slippers we shared, the small gifts I had given him, everything had vanished. He stared at the empty shelves, filled with regret. Sophia arrived and tried to comfort him. Maybe Clara just needed some space. She'll come back when she calms down. But Ethan shook his head. "You don't know her. Clara doesn't act without thinking." As he said that, a thought struck him. He turned to Sophia, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. "That night at the karaoke bar, are you sure it was a man Clara brought who tried to assault you?" Sophia flinched. "I never said Clara brought him. I just said she left and then he came in." "Get out!" he shouted, cutting her off. Sophia ran out of the house in tears. Ethan smashed his phone against the wall and then slapped himself hard across the face, twice. In London, after several nights of poor sleep, my body finally gave in. I slept straight through the night. When I walked downstairs, I was greeted by a chorus of "Happy Birthday" from my family. My arms were soon overflowing with gifts. After breakfast, I wandered into a nearby square and watched some kids on their skateboards. The longer I watched, the more I wanted to try. A girl let me borrow her board. I stepped on, pushed off too hard, and was about to fall when a pair of strong arms caught me. "Thank you," I gasped. When I looked up, I was stunned. The man's features were East Asian, but his eyes were a striking pale blue. He was more handsome than any celebrity I'd ever seen. "Trying to learn?" he asked with a soft smile that made him seem friendly and approachable. I nodded, and he helped me get my balance. He stepped onto the board beside me and gave it a gentle push. Under his guidance, we glided smoothly, and I even managed a couple of simple tricks. The children nearby clapped and cheered. When we stopped, my cheeks were flushed. It was the first time I'd been so close to a stranger. Just then, my brother Leo came jogging over. "You two look like you've known each other for years," he teased. Then the man turned to me and extended his hand. "Julian Vance, it's a pleasure to meet you. I hope I didn't make a bad first impression, Miss Clara." I stared at him in surprise. So this was Julian, my arranged fiancé. I stood there for a moment, frozen, until my brother winked at me. Embarrassed, I quickly shook his hand. "Hello, Julian," I said. He didn't seem awkward at all. "So," he asked right away, "what would you like to do for your birthday? Amusement park? Shopping? A movie?" His calm, friendly manner put me at ease. "Anything's fine," I said softly. He thought for a moment. "All right then, I'll plan the day. If we do everything on my list, we might be home a little late." I blinked, surprised by his interpretation of anything's fine. But it had been so long since I'd just relaxed that I decided to let someone else take the lead. I never imagined that when I agreed to a simple day at the amusement park, my brother would insist on coming, along with a whole group of his rowdy friends. But through all the chaos, Julian stayed by my side, attentive and making sure I was comfortable. I noticed that whenever he glanced at the noisy group, they would immediately quiet down. After a couple of hours, Julian must have sensed I was getting bored. He took my hand and led me away from the crowd. After lunch, we went to see a movie. Unfortunately, a child behind us kept kicking my seat. Julian politely asked the parent to handle the child, but they did nothing. A few minutes later, Julian quietly got up and switched seats, moving one chair away from the child. He then started having an animated conversation with the empty seat next to him. 5 minutes later, the child burst into tears and begged his mother to leave the theater. I spent the rest of the movie trying to stifle my laughter. As we left, Julian glanced at me. "You can laugh," he said with a grin. "Holding it in will only make your stomach hurt." I mouthed the word legend at him. By the time we left a shop later, the sky was dark. I assumed Julian would drive me home, but he headed toward the beach. There, my brother and his friends had set up a barbecue and pitched several tents. Everyone was laughing and grilling food. As the moon rose, they brought out fireworks, lighting them one by one. As the sky exploded with color, my brother nudged me. "Make a wish," he said. Julian added, "Cake is too cliché. Fireworks are better, closer to the stars." I turned to look at Julian and gave him a grateful smile. Then, I closed my eyes and made a wish. On the ride home in my brother's car, I asked him why all his friends were so respectful of Julian. He was quiet for a moment before answering. Julian's parents died when he was young, leaving him a massive company. All of his relatives tried to take a piece of it. Julian, just a kid at the time, and his elderly grandfather fought to hold the business together. As he got older, Julian became incredibly sharp and ruthless in business. He crushed every person who tried to take what was his. That reputation stuck. Everyone knows not to cross him. Honestly, most of those guys today are terrified of him. He chuckled. "But not me. I'm the exception. That's why I trust him with my sister." I rolled my eyes. "You, the exception? I think he just lets you hang around because you're shameless." We bickered all the way home. But as the car slowed down near our street, a figure darted out in front of us. My brother slammed on the brakes. "What the hell?" he yelled, jumping out of the car. I leaned forward and froze. Standing in the headlights was Ethan, his eyes full of sorrow. "Clara," he said softly. My brother looked back at me with a questioning glance, but all I felt was exhaustion. I got out of the car. Ethan staggered forward, reaching for me, but Leo stepped between us. "Hey, Ethan, right? You show up at our house without calling. You could have waited inside." But Ethan ignored him, his eyes locked on me. "Clara, I was afraid you wouldn't see me," he said in a hoarse voice. "I didn't dare go in." I stared at him, confused. If I was just a placeholder, maybe he felt some guilt or regret. But Sophia was back. He had always cared for her. What was he doing here? "I didn't want to see you," I said flatly. "But since you're here, say what you have to say and then leave." At my words, a tear slipped from his eye. "Clara, don't talk to me like this," he whispered. "You never used to speak to me this way." Bringing up the past only made my heart grow colder. "That was then," I said. "This is now." He looked stunned, as if he couldn't understand what was happening. He tried to give me the same warm smile he used to. "Clara, I know you're still angry," he said gently. "I'm sorry. That day, it was my fault. I never should have laid a hand on you. That was wrong." He paused. "And there's nothing between me and Sophia. I only see her as a friend. If you don't like it, I'll cut all contact with her." As he spoke, he didn't seem to notice my brother's face getting darker and darker. Then Ethan pulled a small velvet box from his pocket and dropped to one knee. "Clara," he said, opening the box to reveal a diamond ring. "You used to complain that I always gave you the same bracelets, but I listened. I remembered the ring you always pointed out. Clara, marry me, please." Before I could react, my brother slapped the ring out of his hand. "Ethan, you've got some nerve," he snapped. "You cheated on my sister, the girl our whole family cherishes, and then you dared to hit her? And now you show up here and propose? I swear I'll kill you." My brother's fist connected with Ethan's face, and his eye began to swell. I didn't move to stop him. If Ethan had the guts to fly across the ocean to find me, he should have been prepared for the consequences. Leo wasn't finished. "Marry my sister? Look at yourself. You're not worthy of her. And just so we're clear, my sister is getting married. And her fiancé is 1,000 times better than you in every way, so stay away from her. If I see you near her again, I'll break more than just your face." The mention of my marriage seemed to hit Ethan hard. His eyes widened in disbelief. "You're getting married?" he asked, stunned. "No, I don't believe it. You love me. You stayed with me even when our relationship was a secret." "Clara, don't throw your life away just to get back at me. Don't marry someone you don't love." His words made me laugh, not with humor, but with absurdity. I looked at this man who had once meant the world to me. "Ethan, if there is anyone in this world I do not love, it is you. To be more clear, from the moment I found out I was just a stand-in, from the moment I saw your attic walls covered in pictures of you and Sophia, you became the one person I could never, ever love again." As my words sank in, his face went pale. You know about that?" he murmured, his voice trembling. As I turned to leave, he rushed forward and grabbed my hand. "Clara, please don't go," he pleaded. "It's not what you think. I admit I used to think I couldn't let go of Sophia. But in the days since you left, I finally realized that the one I truly can't live without is you. When I found out you'd moved out, I panicked. I couldn't eat or sleep. I talked to so many people just to get your brother's number. Please give me one more chance. I'm begging you." I shook his hand off, a cold laugh escaping my lips as I remembered the post he had shared. I looked him straight in the eye. "Ethan, no one waits forever. No one except you and Sophia." His face turned white. He stood there, speechless. Without another glance, I took my brother's arm and we left. As we walked past, my brother gave him 2 swift kicks. When we got home, my parents were waiting anxiously. I sat them down and told them everything that had happened over the past few years. My mother just hugged me, holding me for a long time. I thought I had made myself clear to Ethan that night. But the next morning, he was outside our gate again. Julian had arrived with flowers, only to be blocked by him. A servant rushed in. "Young Master Julian is fighting someone at the gate." We hurried outside. It wasn't a fight, it was a one-sided beating. Julian was hitting Ethan with fierce, controlled blows. "Oh no," my brother gasped. "Julian knows Muay Thai. This is bad." I rushed forward, terrified Julian would get into serious trouble. "Julian, stop!" I yelled twice, but he didn't stop. I threw myself at him from behind, wrapping my arms around his waist. Only then did he freeze. When I looked at Ethan, he was a bruised and bloody mess. I immediately called for an ambulance. Later, Julian's assistant told us what happened. Julian had ignored Ethan's taunts until Ethan said something vile about how he had slept with me for 6 years and that I was used goods. That's when Julian lost control. Hearing this, I was so touched I could barely speak. That evening, I gave Julian a small handmade gift. To my surprise, he hung it around his neck as if it were a precious treasure. 2 days before the wedding, I got a call from Sophia. She was no longer pretending to be sweet. "Clara, you witch! Where are you hiding Ethan? Bring him back! His company is going to collapse because of you." Hearing that Ethan hadn't gone home worried me slightly. I told Julian about it. He smiled and told me not to worry. "Since they love being the center of attention so much," he said, "let's invite them to the wedding. They'll find their way here." On our wedding day, Ethan and Sophia showed up uninvited. They were surrounded by more than a dozen security guards who formed a tight circle around them, preventing them from leaving. Ethan, his eyes bloodshot, watched the entire ceremony. He saw us exchange rings and recite our vows. He stood frozen as we shared a deep, joyful kiss. He watched as his body trembled, downing one glass of wine after another. After the ceremony, Julian and I walked toward them, each holding a glass of champagne. By then, Ethan's face was wet with tears. He looked up at me, his voice slurred. "Clara," he cried, "if I had proposed earlier, would we have avoided all this? I made a mistake. I really did." I lifted my glass to him and said with a calm smile, "To you. Thanks for never marrying me." Ethan broke down completely, his sobs growing louder. Then, I turned to Kayla, whose face looked as miserable as Ethan's. There was a fresh red slap mark on her cheek. "Did Ethan hit you?" I asked, genuinely surprised. She flew into a rage. "Feeling proud of yourself, are you, Clara?" she screamed. "Well, life isn't always perfect. Your bad days will come too. Just you wait." I sighed and turned away. Talking to her was pointless. A month later, my brother brought them up over dinner. He said that after the wedding, Ethan drank himself into a stupor and ended up hitting Sophia. She had been pregnant and had a miscarriage. Even after that, Ethan refused to marry her. Consumed by anger, Sophia began slipping drugs into his food. Ethan's health declined rapidly until one day he collapsed and lost the use of his legs. But Sophia wasn't done. She switched to a different drug and poisoned him again, this time taking his voice. That's when Ethan's family got involved. They investigated, discovered the truth, and had Sophia arrested, but that wasn't enough for them. They bribed people in the prison to make sure her life was difficult. Still, none of it could change what had happened. Ethan, for the rest of his life, would be a broken man. After hearing all of this, I turned to Julian. "Julian," I asked, "do you think I'm anything like Sophia?" He looked at me, completely surprised. "You and Sophia? Not in the slightest. You are nothing alike. Why would you ever ask that?" I smiled faintly. "No reason. Because the truth is, when someone truly loves you, they see you as unique and irreplaceable. But when someone doesn't love you, they will always find excuses to say you're just like someone else.